Hello, everyone. Title of my presentation today is The Data They Are a Changin. That's apologies to Bob Dylan. I'm sure he's not quite the data geek that I am. But what I want to talk about is some research on research that we just finished. It's hot off the press, literally. Just got the data, so we haven't had a time to go through everything. But we're basically want to look at the effect of different data sources, different panels, different data collection devices, looking at mobile, smartphone, tablet, and PC, and different questionnaire links. And to take you back, why we did this, it's really, I mean, this is nothing new to anyone in this room, but it is new to a lot of people within suppliers and some clients, is that we are really facing a crossroads in data collection. It's, especially on online panels, it's very difficult to get respondents, to keep respondents on the panel, and to make sure that that data is consistent over time. And there's a concurrent, as everyone knows, a dramatic increase in the use of smartphones. So basically, as we all know, we're going mobile. But when we make this change, just like in the past when research went from pencil and paper to telephone, from telephone to online, the change of pace is getting faster and faster. What impact does it have on our data? We get questions all the time from our clients, and also just within the company about what do I tell a client when when we're trying to recommend him to do a mobile survey, how will that reflect on the data that they collected online for all these past years? Can we compare? Do we have to draw a big black line on the chart and say the pre and post? So that's why we did this study. 4 key questions we're trying to answer here is first, and I sort of mentioned this earlier, is does the data quality differ by sample source? We're looking at different sample sources that TNS uses frequently. Does the data quality differ by data collection device? What's the impact of questionnaire length on termination rates? And you'll see we found quite a bit different response than the gentleman from Qantas yesterday. And what is the impact of optimizing the programming for, it says smartphones, but it's really for the all the different types of devices. So what do we do? So the sample sources, and I'm not going to name names, but we have 2 large panel sources that TNS uses frequently, panel A, panel B. We also tested a router that we're experimenting with. We used a river sample, and we also looked at Google consumer surveys in this as well. We looked at data collection from a PC, from a tablet, or from a smartphone, and we looked at, well, I guess you wouldn't say 10 minutes is a long questionnaire, but we looked at a longer and a shorter questionnaire, and then we optimized the questionnaires. Now, to give you an idea what I mean optimized, these are not gamified, but just simply where we went through and tried to get rid of the 1950s style language. For example, a purchase intent question, which we normally ask, would be something like, assuming this product would be available in the stores would you shop, which of the following statements describes how you would, whether you'd buy this product, to would you buy this? Something as simple as that. And we also added some sliders and some radio buttons and dials to make it more interesting and also make sure everything fit on one screen. Sample composition was basically those 18 to 64, and as long as you were breathing, we wanted to make this as easy as possible. We balanced the cells using differential sampling to make sure we got back representative samples that looked as much like the population as we could get. Not always easy, but that was our goal. And the interviews were conducted at the end of April, and as I say, we just got the results back. So these are hot off the presses, and it's going to be more like a top-line findings. I'm going to show you a little data, but it's a little early days yet. But you'll get there's some themes from the data that are very interesting. The questionnaire, it was very simple. It was basically looking at data where we had some kind of benchmark that we knew the answer to, and we wanted to compare. So we had a number of category ownership and usage questions, the brand of mobile phone. You owned some attributes about those phone brands. We did a concept test. We have a concept test methodology at TNS we use those exact questions on a concept we tested before. It was a yogurt concept. We had some tests. We do a lot of work with carbonated soft drinks, so we did some usage of Coke, Pepsi, and Sprite, and then we did demographics. And the short questionnaire featured a subset of those questions, but the questions were basically identical in each questionnaire length. So what did we find? First of all, and I'm sorry this is not as attractive as some of the other slides we've been seeing, but again, this is very top-line findings. But one thing we found out that we had a big issue with river samples. The river samples produced significantly overstated answers to many of the questions. We're not sure why yet, but they're just like out of bounds. And it was consistent across all the different questions we asked, except for some of the smartphone answers, which you'll see. The key panel suppliers that we used, thank goodness, produced similar answers and answer patterns. Panel B answers were consistently a bit higher, not necessarily meaningful, but there was a consistent bias. The router, something we're experimenting with, also have produced results that were very similar to our panel A, which is our primary panel. And the Google, we've done a lot of work, a lot of experimentation with Google consumer surveys with great success. This produced, again, as it has in the past, it produced answers that were very similar to those by panel A, but as we've seen before, the answers are a little biased, a little low. Now that could be, they could be more truthful, but they tend to be biased a little low. So we were very pleased overall. And the biggest thing we were surprised about is the fact that we generally got very similar results by device. I was expecting differences there. Just as the gentleman from Qantas said yesterday, he saw the same, we saw the same thing as well. Very similar answers by device. In terms of the optimized versus non-optimized questionnaire, same results, basically got the same results. The difference was we got much higher termination rates for the non-optimized questionnaire. So when we used the typical old-fashioned marketing research questionnaire language, which we all, I'm sure, use, we got much higher termination rates. Questionnaire length, exactly as we expected. Longer questionnaire produced dramatically higher dropout rates. And in terms of interview length, both the optimized and non-optimized questionnaires were about the same length for respondents. In fact, the optimized questionnaire took about 10% longer to complete. And we've seen, I think, some people have talked about that in this conference. So again, those are the basic results. I want to show you some of the data now. Now, given the fact that we have over 50 cells in this test, trying to show 50 cells on one chart is a bit challenging. So what you're going to see is on the y-axis, you're going to see the response level to the question, the percent of people who said they drank a beer in the past week, for instance. And on the bottom, you're going to see all the different cells, and the lines are going to show you the panel source. So for example, here's smoked a cigarette. So the green line, you can see, so the PCs are the PC questionnaires, the standard questionnaire versus the optimized, they're in the gray. Then the tablet is in the light blue, and the smartphone is in the darker blue. And then you can see within each cell, it's a long versus short questionnaire. So it's a lot to take in, but the key thing is to look at the general shape of the graph. And for instance, you'll see in the smoked a cigarette, ranging from 40 to 70% is so far off truth that makes that really sort of a non-starter. The only thing that's even close is really the smartphone for the river sample on the long questionnaire. And you see our two key panel sources, panel A and panel B, in the red and the yellow. Pretty similar with with panel B, and the red being a bit higher. And you can see the router. We didn't do, not all the cells had all the different versions, but you can see where they fell out. And then on the far right, you can see where Google consumer surveys. And because of the limitations or the questionnaire length in Google, that's only short, so you can see the 3 different devices that we got on there. So that's smoked a cigarette. If we looked at motor oil, we saw a similar pattern with, again, them coming together on smartphone, but otherwise seeing consistent in the 2 major panel sources. In terms of flying a commercial airline, again, similar, this time a little closer. Same with cat ownership. Again, around 30% is about what the ownership of households that have cats. You can see that the river sample, with the exception of smartphone, is way off. Other ones are more similar and also more closer to the benchmark data. BlackBerry, only people in the river sample are still hanging on to their BlackBerries. That's a finding we're seeing. Then on this is all our concept test results, and this is critical, especially from a device standpoint, because at TNS we've probably done 150,000 concept tests using this same methodology. So we have a huge database, all based on online research. So as we're moving to smartphone, we have this big database, and we do not want to have to go through this whole exercise of trying to calibrate data. So it was very critical as to see the fact that we got very consistent results by device. That makes us feel a ton better in terms of looking at being able to look at concepts. Plus the idea we looked at the difference in questionnaire language from that very verbose intro that I said at the beginning to the would you buy this, and again getting consistent results. And I'm not going to go through all the data, but the lines were very similar for every question within the 9 key questions that we asked in our concept test. So we're very pleased about that. And then here's some on Coke usage, and again, it comes together on smartphones, but is way apart on PC and tablet, no matter how we ask the question for river sample. And then for Pepsi, again, similar patterns as well, but way overstated, I mean, by a lot. So you can see it's very consistent results on router and very consistent results on with our online panels, whether we're doing regardless of the device, so that's a great finding. And then we looked at interview length, and you can see it's obviously, you can see the difference between short and long. Short average 5, the long was longer, a little bit longer than we thought. So this data makes total sense that the longer ones are very consistent. You can see on the smartphone, in all cases, they took a little bit longer. And again, that's not too surprising. And then finally, the termination rates. You can see the difference between the heights of the bars on the standard versus the optimized. The standard questionnaires, the long ones, produced much higher termination rates. We still saw the same pattern on the optimized, but much less so. So optimization definitely helps. Otherwise, that data makes sense. It's very different than the Quantis data we talked about yesterday, but this makes a lot of sense to me that the longer you keep the person, the more the less likely they're going to stick with you. So then, really, basically, to wrap up, and what we're seeing so far is, right now we're saying, at least for us, and whether this is advice for you or not, river sampling requires some caution. We need to understand why we're getting those differences, where the sources were for this specific sample were, and why they were so different. We also tend, depending on project, sometimes have to blend samples from different sample sources to meet our quotas. So the fact that the results were similar was good, but we need to make sure that if we're blending samples, we have the same ratio of the different samples in if we're doing a wave study to make sure that we're getting unwanted bias doesn't creep in. The great news, device agnostic surveys appear to be very feasible. That certainly helps our response rate. You can let the consumer complete the survey as they like without worrying about effect on your results. And as I said before, if you're looking at something that's a method that's based on a certain device and it's data-based, this gives you some confidence that you can compare it with if you use another data collection device. Keep your mobile questionnaire short, always good advice. We're suggesting under 6 minutes because that produced the best kind of response rate. I think in general as our industry, we need to do a much better job of reeling our clients in and making sure that we reduce questionnaire length. I think it helps overall. And optimize your questionnaires. It's great research practice, and it certainly reduces early termination. So very short and sweet, but it's, I think, some impactful stuff, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Did you control for standard demographics?
Yes. Yes. Now, right now, this is unweighted data, and we're going to go back and weight it. But the patterns, the demographics of the river sample were the most off. So we're going to go back and have to weight that. That's probably part of it. But we don't want to get in a situation where we have to weight data so much, because then you lose sample efficiency and it creates a problem. So even if we have to weight it, that's still not a good thing.
Any other questions out there? Wonderful. Thank you
Great.
so much.
Thank you very much.